Patricia, thank you so much for coming along today. It is such a pleasure to have you here. We were just laughing, I know, before we started the interview because I said just before I was wearing exactly the same color as you. So I'm happy that we mixed it up. But such a pleasure to see you. You're over in Malta. For those who might not have crossed paths with you before, how would you introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm Patricia Bonnici. I'm a counseling psychologist, originally from Malta, and I'm back in Malta now. I studied in the UK, so I studied at Regent's College when it was still called Regent's College. And I have my practitioner's doctorate in counseling psychology slash existential psychotherapy. So then, since then, I do teaching at various places, an SPC primarily. I also do a little bit of teaching at the Minister Centre, like examine doctorates, supervised doctorates, clinical supervision. And then I also have private practice. I work both with individuals and I also like to do a lot of couple work. So if I have to kind of say my niche, kind of my niche would be relationships slash sexual health, sexual issues, sexual identity, work a lot with gay men. So that's kind of really where my main areas of interest are. But of course, I do work kind of with a generic population as well. So, just sort of meaninglessness in life, finding direction, depression, anxiety, so quite a broad spectrum really. So that's me on the professional level, and kind of more the personal level, like traveling, particularly pre-COVID when we could actually travel, reading, theater, cinema, cooking, eating. So that's kind of who I am.
Oh, magnificent. And so I suppose in an interview about existential ideas, a great place to start might be how do you understand existential ideas?
Okay, so I think it's really broad, right? And I think we've kind of also said a little bit before we started that there's no real one definition. So for me, what I focus on a lot is maybe kind of what aspects seem to fit in really well with existentialism, and what do I pick up on a lot in therapy. So stuff around making choices, and that those choices come with responsibility, so that it's not about this easy choice that I want everything and I want things to work out exactly the way I want them to work out, but I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to win some things. I'm also going to lose some things. And that is the very nature of choice, which is what makes choice difficult, and maybe what brings clients to us who are very stuck because they want to, well, they want it all, right? They want to have this thing. They want the relationship. They want to have the child. They also want to be able to work 70 hours a week and have a fun social life. And they don't really know which of those is going to make them happier, because they kind of want it all and they feel that it's going to miss out by choosing one or another. So that's a big one, with choice and responsibility. Freedom, I guess, kind of covers that as well. Stuff around anxiety and sort of the existential anxiety sense of finding meaning, finding purpose. What comes up when we feel stuck? What comes up when we feel that maybe we're just sort of going through life rather than living life, and kind of having this maybe low level sense of dread that nothing seems to bring excitement or joy, that I seem to be struggling a lot with making choices and anxiety and so on. So I think for me that really comes in as well in existential thoughts. And then I would say, maybe if I'm thinking of it specifically for therapy, it would be about kind of that it doesn't have maybe very fixed techniques. It's much more about an attitude of exploration, an attitude of understanding, and just helping the client to kind of gain clarity about whatever issues they're bringing to therapy. And from then, hopefully, it enables them to either accept the situation as, this is my reality right now, and this is what I have to live with, and I need to accept it. Or, now that I understand what my reality is, now I can make different choices and different decisions, and hopefully that will take me somewhere else. So for me, there's also that element of sort of the attitude towards our lives that we take on, and maybe kind of, to use the fancy word, kind of that phenomenological exploration of just kind of really not having to pathologize, not having to explain things and say you are this way because of this, but let's just really understand, what way are you and what way would you like to be, and how can you use your freedom to get to that place that you really want to be.
So what drew you towards these exploring specifically existential ideas then?
Well, I'd studied philosophy A level, first of all, and I found that quite interesting. And I thought the debates were quite interesting, even sort of as being 16, 17. Um, I didn't have it at university because my original plan at university was to major in English, and psychology was supposed to be kind of a bit of a filler because it sounded interesting, but I just really wanted to do literature. And then I kind of changed paths. So then I switched to psychology. I stayed an extra year and switched my major back to psychology. But yeah, I always stayed interested in philosophy, and I always kind of liked discussing ideas and debating, and maybe not really having sort of one truth and that, you know, this is the way things are done, but there are lots of ways that we can do things, and this person thinks like this and that person thinks like that. So I think, you know, philosophy was quite interesting. um and then eventually when I came to choose kind of where to study, you know, and I started going through, I was very sure I didn't want to do CBT, which kind of seemed very linear and very much maybe not quite what I was thinking, in terms of there's lots of different ways of doing things, you know, there's lots of protocols, this is the way you do it. So I think, you know, I kind of quite naturally was then drawn to existential, that, oh, look, it's philosophy, it's about attitude, it doesn't pathologize, it's really about just exploring things as they are. So I think that's kind of really what drew me in, this philosophical aspect of it.
And you were saying here that you're studying philosophy, I guess more generally in A level, as early as A level. Were you studying this in the UK or in Malta?
No, this was in Malta. So our Maltese system of education is very similar to the UK. We do O levels and then we do A levels. So we kind of have sixth form for 2 years, and we have a subject for 2 years. So we didn't really do existentialism for A level. We had kind of lots of political stuff, Marxism. Oh, we had ethics, morality, this sort of stuff as well, a little bit of logic. So yeah, so we didn't specifically have existentialism, but I kind of had read, you know, a bit of Camus, and maybe the more accessible existential philosophy, since Camus, you know, has like L'Étranger, The Outsider, The Plague, which are kind of novels, but not quite. That was quite interesting to kind of read about and discuss as well.
And so here you're saying that this philosophy came first, and then you'd found psychology was kind of a filler, but then there was something about it, I imagine, which just really, really took over to you, because of course now it's such a big part of your life.
Yeah, because I guess I think I would still say that sort of literature, you know, so not maybe quite English, but literature was kind of my first love, you know, like reading books and talking about books and kind of getting lost in the book and the character, and kind of, you know, they're almost real people, you know, you're stuck with this character and you really like them or you really don't like them. I mean, I suppose there's an element there of psychology, right? Because why do you like the character and why don't you like them? Why is one believable and why is one reprehensible, and why do you connect with some but not others? So there was kind of this element of it. And I suppose then kind of the switch to psychology was a little bit twofold. So one of it was, oh my god, this is really interesting, and I'm doing really well in it, and I'm really enjoying reading about it. You know, it's kind of all new. And a second element of it was also, well, what do I want to do for the rest of my life, so to say? You know, so if I study English, how many career opportunities are open, right? Well, I can lecture, which I would love and I still enjoy doing, and that is pretty much it. Well, I guess, you know, you can write, but are you really going to earn a living? So they were kind of like, okay, so it's kind of a very small, limited way. While with psychology, there felt, all right, so I can lecture still, which is what I want to do. But I can also then work with people and be a therapist. And my friends had always, you know, come to me and, you know, kind of, you know, opening up and talking about issues. And I guess maybe girls do this a lot. So analyzing a problem from 360 degrees over and over again. So it seemed like, oh yeah, I think I can do that. And I think that would actually be quite fun. So that's maybe two careers that can be incorporated. And maybe that would be more exciting than simply limiting myself to English literature and just lecturing. So I guess that was kind of where the switch happened.
And earlier you were saying you're specifically interested in kind of relationships and sexual health. And so how did this start for you? And would you like to share a little bit more about this?
I suppose the elements, I was always also quite interested in medicine. So that was kind of one of my early career choices, which I thought like, oh, maybe I'll become a doctor, which didn't happen. But I kind of stayed interested in kind of health conditions, medicine, working with people who had different health conditions. And then one of my placements, which at the Terence Higgins Trust, which is an HIV organization. So it works with people who are HIV positive or at risk of contracting HIV, which I found really interesting. And that kind of took me down the road of kind of the medical aspect of working with people who might have illnesses, plus the sexual element, right? Because a lot of them would have got it from sexual contact, and a lot of the men would be talking about promiscuous sexual activity. So I think that kind of really developed my interest around that, around sexuality, around what does it mean to be a gay man, what does it mean to come out, what does it mean to kind of exist in a world that is maybe very heteronormative, and to fit in or not to fit in, to be yourself, how to be yourself. Do you have to lie? How open can you be? So I kind of, it brought all of those elements together, and I really found that to be really very interesting work. I guess then that kind of took me on that route. I was also quite interested in hospice, so I worked for a short time as well in hospice. Because again, I find that quite interesting. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from kind of working with people who are approaching death, and maybe just looking back on their lives and what has been achieved and what hasn't, and the different experiences, whether it's someone who's in their 80s or someone who's in their 30s, and someone who might, at whichever of those ages, 30 or 80, feels that they have lots of regrets and life wasn't lived in the way, or didn't unfold in the way that they thought it was going to, versus someone who might feel that, yes, I'm only 30, but I've done this and I've done that and I've done that. And there was so many other things I wanted to do. But I think for the 30 years that I was here, I packed so much into them. So it was still a great, a fabulous life. It's just a pity that it's been cut short. So I've always liked those aspects of kind of maybe working around health, because I think they bring up a lot of that existential anxiety, right? That threat of oblivion, that threat of annihilation. And I think that's kind of really what we might call, right, a boundary situation, right? So you're really faced with something that's going to have a huge impact on your life, whether it is, I am now HIV positive and this is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. And I don't know what that's going to mean for me specifically, because for some people it looks like this and for some people it looks like that. Or whether it is, I've just been diagnosed with a terminal illness and I have X amount of time to deal with this new reality. I think, it's a really, really rich place to be. And I really enjoy working with that.
Because I feel that even in today's world, HIV is still so stigmatized and misunderstood. I wondered if you could shed a little insight into that.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think sometimes even sort of the clients who got the diagnosis themselves can sometimes find it really difficult to accept, what does it mean? How is it going to affect their lives? And maybe we kind of maybe have the element there of denial, where you have some clients who just say, oh, it's just the virus. It's like it's just like the flu, right? It's just a virus. It's not going to kill you. I'm going to be perfectly fine. To maybe other people at the other end of the spectrum who think, oh my God, my life's over. I only have a few years left to live. How sick am I going to get? And obviously anything in between that. And yeah, I think for a lot of people, it is still very stigmatized. And who do they tell and how do they tell and when do they tell them? I think particularly maybe around sexual partners. So if I'm still single when I'm diagnosed and I meet someone, should I tell them before I even meet them? Like we're talking on text, should I tell them, oh, by the way, I'm HIV positive, and then they might cancel the date? Should I go on the date and not mention it? Maybe then if we're about to have sex, but is that too late? Because then we're already in the bedroom, and then that gets me into trouble, because why did you wait until now? Do I say it afterwards? So I think this can be sometimes a really big dilemma, because there is a lot of fear of being rejected, of not being wanted, of being seen as whatever, right, contagious, infectious, and so on. So I think, there's a lot around that still that can be quite anxiety provoking, and also going on meds, when is it time to start meds, and what is it going to be like. Some people have side effects, some people seem to do very well on them, so kind of also coming to terms with that.
It feels really compatible, doesn't it, with existential thoughts, because like you were saying at the beginning, that's so much about choice and about responsibility, and how much do we share of ourselves and when is the right time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's kind of maybe also having trust in the world, right? So maybe, there's a little bit of that sort of attachment theory stuff around, can they trust that this person is going to welcome them anyway, whatever that might mean, whether that might mean, yes, we can still have sex, we'll just have to be careful, whether that might mean, so what, what, we can still have a relationship, we can learn to live with this together as a couple, kind of, really trusting the world that you're going to be vulnerable with someone, you're going to tell them something about yourself that might be stigmatizing or embarrassing, painful, scary, whatever way you perceive it to be, and hoping that the other person will take it well, whatever that might mean.
And indeed, you work with couples, don't you?
Yeah, so even at THT, that was my first time working with couples. So they sometimes would have couples. So yeah, that's where I really started working with couples, and they would be a variety. So they might be, one is positive, one is not. They might both be positive. And sometimes, can eventually sort of THT opened up further. And they would have people who didn't really know, they weren't really there for HIV, they were simply gay men, and they were then paying sort of clients, so they would just come for other relational issues as well.
Mhm. How would you say that existential ideas help specifically working with couples then?
um I think that's a really interesting question, because I think there isn't a lot written about working with couples. So there's bits and pieces here and there, kind of chapters of individual papers, but not really very much. Um, so what I use it for is, I kind of still use it in the same way that I use it in individuals. Kind of, what are we going to zoom in on? What are the choices that this couple is making, both as individuals? So you are choosing to stay in this relationship despite everything that you like and you don't like in it, for both people, and what choices are they making as a couple, of how they're going to go through life, right? So kind of to try to zoom down on that. So if you say that you are so unhappy for these reasons, why are you still here? And maybe not to accept, because I think sometimes people can give a kind of very easy answers, right? Oh, because I have kids, or oh, because we own a property together, and I can't afford to leave. Um, which I think, in a sense, isn't really them making a choice, unless they're really going to stop and think about that. Because I think you can choose to stay for those reasons, but after really exploring that, rather than just kind of, this is a throwaway, like, oh, I don't have a choice, I have to stay because we have kids together. But rather, I choose to stay because for me it is really important that my children have this and this experience, and since for me it is important for this to happen, I choose to put up with these things that I do not like. And therefore, maybe as a couple, we can then choose, how can we live in a way that can maximize things to the most, right? Maybe we don't love each other anymore, and maybe we aren't particularly happy, but we're going to choose to stay together because both of us, and I think this happens quite a lot in Malta, which is still quite Catholic, and divorce is very, very new. We've had divorce for about 10 years, maybe a little bit more, 15, I don't know, something like that. So it's still quite a new thing in Malta, and it's still frowned upon quite a lot. So a lot of couples will really try to stay together for the kids. Um, but can they then make choices? Okay, so how will we stay together? What sort of relationship do we want to have? Will we carry on having sex? What sort of private relationship versus public relationship? So maybe we'll go to family Christmas dinner together because that's what's expected of us, but when we are home, I'll cook for the kids and I'll prepare stuff for the kids and you'll take care of yourself. So can they make these choices rather than kind of maybe living by default on, this is the way we've always done it, this is the way we're going to carry on doing it? So that's kind of where I try to bring in that existential element to help couples make these decisions.
So from empowering yourself to understand that you're actually making choices here and what choices might be available, rather than just thinking I'm stuck in a situation that I'm not comfortable with, and there's no choice, and it's hopeless and it's helpless.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it can be sometimes really hard, right? Because I think maybe it's quite maybe a modern notion, right, that we associate choice only with like positive things, right? That choices are easy and that choices always make us happy, rather than, yeah, that's some choices, that's when I'm choosing whether I want to eat vanilla or chocolate ice cream, where both of them are pretty good and I just don't really know which one I feel like today. And oh, that's such a hard choice because both of them are so nice. But sometimes choices are really, really hard, right? I can either leave my husband, and that means that the kids are going to have this disruption in their lives and they're not going to be living with both parents, and it's going to look like this and this, and it might mean we're going to have to sell the lovely house and we're going to live in a tiny little flat because that's all we're going to be able to afford, and that's not going to be very pleasant for the kids because they need to share a bedroom, and right now they each have their own, all of these things. Or else we can carry on living this way. But it also means, therefore, that I can't start another relationship because we're going to stay married. It also means that home might not be a happy place for me. I might not really look forward to it because I'm sharing this home with this person and I don't want to be with this person anymore. And we fight all the time. And so our kids are exposed to two adults who are very unhappy and who maybe fight all the time. And these are the choices we have to make. And no choice is a particularly great choice, but we have to evaluate, which one of those matters the most. Because I think maybe say which one of them makes me happiest isn't quite right? Which one of them is more meaningful and helps me achieve or reach the place that I want to reach, helps me meet my values, my goals, what is most important for me, and how I understand, life to have value in them.
And you bring in here the important kind of reminding us that it's not just that you're making a choice, it's that you're making a choice that's influenced by your potential religions, by the culture that you're in, by the time that you're in, by what is legally accessible to you, but also the fact that your choices are going to have implications on other people as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sort of this kind of refers to Sartre. I think he refers to it in existentialism, so humanism, that we're kind of, by making a choice, we're legislating for everyone, right? And maybe this is particularly seen in a couple, right? That whatever choices the parents make, the children have to live with, right? So if the parents decide we're going to separate, we're going to get divorced, the children have to live with this and all the consequences that comes about with that. And if the parents decide we absolutely hate each other, we fight nonstop, we can't look at each other without having a fight, but we're going to stay together because this is what we think is best for the children also have to put up with this, right? So they are making a choice for themselves, for their family, for their friends, in a sense that it's not only impacting them, but maybe particularly impacting the children as well.
It's really interesting because this is the second time this week that this kind of idea has come up for me, but that it's also okay, and existential ideas can suggest to us that it's also okay and probably inevitable that sometimes in life we're going to make a choice which is going to hurt us and that we're going to cry over and we're going to be sad over, but that can also be incredibly important, and like you put in quotes, what's right for us. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of choices are like that, right? And we maybe don't like to think of it that way, but I think very few choices are all wins, right? I think it's almost a definition of the word decide, right? That you choose something at the expense of something else. And yeah, maybe some things, the choice to me is so obvious that I don't know, I can either buy a car or go on holiday. And I'm thinking, well, I live in a big city, I'll never drive a car anyway. Like that's a no-brainer. Of course I'm going to go on holiday. But I don't think most of the choices we make are like that, right? Most of the choices we make are really, really hard. But I want the car, and I need the car because I really need to get the kids around, and I live in the middle of nowhere and I can't get by without the car. And I also would really like to go on a holiday because I haven't traveled in years and I would really like, could do with that. But which are the choices I'm going to make? And we have these really hard choices, right? I think this is our reality for most of the time.
So would you say that there's been times of your life that these existential ideas have really helped you to overcome something?
Yeah, and I think I try to apply them to myself. So I think, of course, it's easier said than done, right? It's easier when you're in the therapist chair and you're kind of nicely removed, asking the questions and sort of imparting wisdom or reading it on a book and going, rather than when you find yourself in that choice, right? And you're thinking, but I want everything. And it's really not fair that I have to lose this in order to gain that. But yeah, I try to sort of give them to myself as well and kind of think of, okay, so rather than maybe thinking right now what really kind of, what would make me happy, so to say, what would increase most value in my life, what would kind of really give me what I want to get, in all sorts of different situations. So, do I stay in a relationship or do I not? What is the price of staying? What is the price of leaving? Or maybe quite a big one, like when I was deciding, do I stay in London longer? So I'd been there for 9 years, or do I go back home? And there were elements that I wanted for both. And in some ways where Malta felt really, really home, and I really want to go back home. And in other ways where London felt really like home. And I want to have both. Why can't I just kind of fly back and forth all the time? Why can't I make an amalgam of the two of them and have this third little country which has all the bits that I like from this one and all the bits that I highlight from the other one, and that's where I want to exist. So then kind of applying some of those existential ideas of how do you make a choice that is quite difficult, and how do you accept the responsibility and kind of not reduce it to, this is what I have to do, I don't have a choice, but this is what I want to do, despite the difficulty of the choice.
And I'm reminded of what you were saying at the beginning, and I really picked up that you use the word interesting a lot. And so there's this suggestion that you're making choices based on what is truly interesting to you, what is truly meaningful to you in a situation. And I suppose it takes something to be able to notice and recognize that within yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe part of, well, definitely therapy, but I don't think you have to do it through therapy, but maybe, getting to know the self, right? So whichever way you do that, and I think some people journal and some people do meditation or mindfulness, and or you might just want to call it reflection and getting to know yourself and reading. But yeah, I think that is about knowing what matters to you in all senses, right? What are my values? What is important? What makes me happy? What do I enjoy? What makes me sad? What upsets me? And I think, that's maybe one level, kind of the more phenomenological, right? Just descriptive. This is how I am. This is who I am. And if you wanted to, you could also then ask, why am I this way? Where is this coming from? Where did I learn this? Why does this matter to me more than something else? And then based on that, I think it becomes maybe a little bit easier to make choices, right? Because I think, again, if a choice is difficult, it's always going to be difficult, but maybe it moves us a little bit out of that stuck place that I know this is difficult, and I know that right now it's very upsetting to make this choice and to lose something, but I also know that based on what my values are, what is important to me, what my ultimate goals are, where I want to get to, this is the decision that will get me closer to there. And therefore maybe it's a bit of like delayed gratification, right? I'm going to lose something now, but in the long run it's going to get me closer to something that really matters to me as well.
So for people who were maybe sitting here and facing a big choice, we're talking about understanding ourselves and learning how we can make these choices. But what advice would you kind of specifically give to someone that was in that situation?
um it's really hard because I think as a therapist I try to avoid giving advice. So like with my clients I really wouldn't, but I guess, yeah, so part of it is get to know yourself. Sometimes with clients I like to kind of do this, there's this kind of online tool called the values and action questionnaire, the VIA, which I sometimes give to clients, and it kind of rates what your values are, like honesty, beauty, humor, excellence. So it kind of gives people a sense of, this is what matters to me, this is what I invest a lot in, and they can kind of just think about it, what's kind of maybe low on the scale, what does it mean to them that these values aren't really important, do they kind of feel objectively that I'd like to have more of this, like maybe spiritual elements, or maybe elements which are more like curiosity, academic sort of stuff. Do they want more of these? How can they invest more in that? So I think that might be the first step. And I think there can be lots of stuff that people can do to get to know themselves. So sometimes with clients, I also suggest things like journaling. And I kind of don't like to tell them how to do it. So I tell them, there's lots of ways of doing it. You can buy books that kind of give you prompts and give you, a little story, or they ask you questions and they give you a blank, and you can write on it, and you can maybe just flip through the book and see which ones are interesting. Because today it might be that something really strikes you and another thing kind of really seems stupid. And you're thinking, why would I want to think about that? That really has no relevance to my life. They can find all of this stuff as well on like Pinterest. There's lots of stuff there that you can find. So kind of these exercises, sometimes I think you can get to know yourself by asking people who are close to you, and maybe finding kind of a broad sort of cross section, someone in your life, someone who's maybe known you in a sense forever, a childhood friend who's grown up with you, someone who knows you in your professional life but doesn't really know you very well personally, your best friend. Who do they see you as? Do you recognize yourself in their description of you? What impression do they have of you? What do they believe your strengths and weaknesses are? Like sometimes I tell them, would you ask someone to write this down for you, and you maybe get whatever 5 letters from them, your top qualities, what I think your strengths are, this is my perception of you, what do you do with this information, does it match who you think you are, what do all of them seem to agree on? So I think there are lots of these ways of just really getting to know ourselves, and then I would hope that that kind of maybe makes it a little bit clearer, and maybe also increases a little bit our self-confidence. Because I think sometimes we know either what we want to do or what we should do, whatever word you want to use, but we're really scared of doing it, either because I don't want to take responsibility. What if it goes wrong? What if I regret it later? What if it doesn't work out the way? Then what? And I think that's also part of the reason why in therapy we don't generally give advice, right? Quit your job. You're so unhappy there. I'm sure something better will come up. And then, 6 months, 1 year later, they're still unemployed, and it's your fault because you told me to quit my job. And here I am now on the brink of homelessness because you were the smart person who told me I should really quit my job. So I think by doing that, they get to know themselves, and maybe they can gain also the confidence of knowing what is right for them, what they believe they can do, what they believe they can achieve. That one person believes, yes, I can quit my job and I'm pretty sure I'll get a new one because in my industry, blah, 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 it's really easy, versus someone else who says, no, this is a really bad time in my industry to quit my job. So I'm going to be looking for jobs, but I'm going to keep working at the place I'm still at, and sort of helping them get to that place and to get that confidence that they can make a decision and they can really get behind that decision. And kind of back to what we started with, they can take responsibility for that in a sense, whichever way it goes. Because I think sometimes even when things go well, if we have maybe low self-esteem, we might still say, oh, it's because I got lucky. It's because whatever, this person helped me out. It's because I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, rather than saying, no, this took a series of actions and decisions on my part to get me there. And maybe there was a little bit of luck, and maybe kind of, things happen in the right sequence of events. But really a lot of it was because of stuff that I did. And this is why I'm here. And if I can take that on board, that means that the next time I'm at a crossroads or I'm trying to make another decision, I can maybe start trusting myself, because I can start believing, yes, I am capable of making choices, maybe even when things don't quite go as expected and they don't quite turn out the way I wanted to. I survived. I found myself in that really difficult place, and I had to make a new series of decisions because it wasn't where I wanted to be. But I survived. I got myself out of it. I got to myself to this place, which is a good place, or I'm on a way to a better place. And therefore I trust that I can keep doing that again and again and again.
And I realize, even listening to you here, that there's a lot of emphasis growing up on that we should make choices, but less influence on how we understand what choices are right, how we connect and learn ourselves, how we understand what our values are.
Yeah. I think kind of the word values is really underused, isn't it? I think some people actually struggle, like, what are values, to give a definition, or even if you're not asking for a definition, can you mention a few things which are values? What are your values? I think a lot of people struggle. Are they morality? Is it different? Is it like something that kind of philosophy gives us? Is it something that religion gives us? Is it kind of something like the law, that you should obey the law, you should kind of do what's expected of you? So I think that is one of the first things, right? What are values really? And then maybe the step beyond that is, and how do we use them to direct ourselves, right? To make choices. How are we really living in line with that? Do I say, for example, that I have the value of honesty? Oh, I'm really honest and it's really important and people should be really honest. But then, I don't know, I'm in a restaurant and the bill comes and I notice that they didn't charge me for my glass of wine. And I go like, oh, great, that's £7 right there. So yeah, I'm not going to say anything. It was their mistake. I didn't steal anything. I gave them exactly what they wanted. Rather than saying, well, excuse me, I also had a glass of wine and it's not listed here. I think that is, in a sense, putting it into action, right? I am an honest person. I believe in honesty. And therefore, even when it works out worse for me, I am still honest and I tell people about that. And the restaurant might then go like, oh, thanks for telling me that. It's our mistake. It's fine. It's on the house. Or, oh, thanks for that. I'll get you a new bill. I'll just go add it to the bill. So this sort of thing, am I living my life in line with my values in really, really small things, right? Because that might be a very small and simple example. But then when it gets to much bigger things, if I'm not able to do that in that small situation, will I be able to do it in maybe a much bigger situation of, I don't know, I found out that my boss is cheating on their tax and I'm an accountant, and do I tell them? Do I report them? Do I carry on hiding the mistake? How will this affect me? How will this make me think of myself? Do I need to realign my values and think, well, maybe actually honesty isn't really an important value for me. Maybe I think it's important for other people, but not how I choose to live my own life. Or I'm only honest when I find it's beneficial to me or it has no cost to me. But when it has a cost to me, I don't actually choose to live in that way. So I think kind of these are ways maybe of helping people to live more in line with their values, by helping them explore what does it really look like to have the value, but also to live in line with it.
Because you really highlight here that it's not these existential ideas, these themes, about our values and taking responsibility for our choices and the consequences and how these align with kind of what feels authentically true to ourselves. And these aren't just about these massive questions in life, they're about our everyday lived experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And I think essentially this is what life is made up of, right? Maybe we really look at boundary situations, like big decisions. Do I move countries or not? Do I have children? Do I get married? Which of course will have a huge impact on our lives, right? It's going to look really, really different if I do A or B. But also life will look really, really different based on each of these tiny decisions, right? Do I forgive someone who was rude to me? Do I choose to do my work well? Do I choose to be on time to staff or not? I think these are what's really shaping us, both as we are as human, also how other people around us think of us, right? And therefore how they treat us.
And I'm thinking here that also the fact that we are so multifaceted, we as human beings are have so many roles, so many ways of being, and so many things that we engage with. And so you could have someone that was as a nurse and was thinking, I must be a good person, I must have great values because I dedicate my life to this. But then if they go around, in their between time, maybe graffitiing or pushing people over at bus stops, or who knows, and then they're going to be living with a kind of a perpetual sense of, but I'm doing such an honorable job, so why am I always feeling bad? And I suppose it's finding that alignment, like not the consistency even.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to kind of live in line with that. And that of course we are different and we can change, because I guess that's maybe a very core existential thing, right? That we are not a thing, right? We are, maybe a star would say, nothingness. and as nothingness we choose what to embody, right? We choose kind of what to focus on, what to take up in the world, and we can make that choice every day. So I guess as existentialists, we like to say we choose who we are, right? I choose every day, do I want to stay married to this person? I choose every day, do I want to stay friends or do I want to stay loyal? And maybe I would say most of us, right, we don't do that on a conscious level. I don't think we wake up in the morning and say, like, do I want to be married today to the same person? Yes, I do. But in a sense, we are doing that, right, by kind of by default almost. And that maybe periodically we visit that and we actually think about it. Do I want to carry on doing this? But if I choose that, then I have to sort of consistently live up to that, right? Because that choice brings with it a set of consequences, right? A set of circumstances. And I can't sort of maybe choose the bits of circumstances that I really like, but then the bits of circumstances that I don't like, then I kind of try to get away from. So I think that's maybe where the consistency comes in, that this choice brings with it this package. And I have to find a way of sort of making peace with that. And if I can't, can the package be changed? So I don't know if we're talking about relationships, marriage. So I have an issue with fidelity. I don't think it's really that important. I want to be with someone, but I don't think that having sex with other people should really make a difference to the primary relationship. So that might be able to be negotiated, right, with a partner. So what do you think about fidelity? We're in a relationship together. What do you think? How do you feel about it? What would it be like if for us the definition would be this, that it would be, I don't know, we could have sex with other people under these conditions with these rules? Would that work for the two of us? So then some of that might be renegotiated, right? But it can't be that kind of I make the decision for myself if it's impacting also somebody else. I think that's maybe where the consistency to what we believe in has to come in. And maybe if it's with other people, it has to be negotiated with others.
And like you're saying here, also finding that balance between not questioning absolutely every single decision that you're making and that you've ever made in every moment, because let's face it, that's impossible and that would just exhaust and wear people out. But also to not just live by default, to take that space and that time to reflect on why you are living and being the way that you are living and being.
Yeah, yeah. I think therapy is a really good place for that, right? To kind of have that 1 hour, whether you do it weekly or whether you do it every few weeks, every other week, to kind of check in with yourself. And even if it's not therapy, to kind of maybe have a date with yourself, right? So the same way that you might make a date for yourself to get a facial, to do your hair, to do your nails. It's kind of your thinking time, whatever you want to call it. And some people might do it every day and they do meditation practice, or they do kind of some breathing exercise, or they go for a long walk. And while they're walking, they're thinking about what's happening in my life right now and how do I feel about it, and what do I want to do about it. But to kind of really give yourself that time, right? And I think it really has to be a time that we make rather than when I have time, when it comes around, because I don't think it just comes around, right? You have to make space for it, and you need to decide how much of that do you want, right? I need half an hour a day, I need 1 hour a week, I need it works best for me if I do it once a month and I give myself half a day and I take myself off somewhere and I just sit there and I draw and I listen to music. And I think that you kind of find the space of, this is where I explore my life, where I look at it, where I kind of make decisions in a sense, see where I'm going, see if I'm still on track. And some people might do it maybe more like in a coaching sense, right? So they might have like a bullet journal and they have goals and they have dates of when they want to achieve these goals and they break it down. And, this week I need to focus on this, or I'm going to improve myself by taking this course, or I'm going to teach myself this new life skill, or this week I'm going to practice this thing, which is one way of doing it. And another way can also be, just kind of more reflection and thinking about things and then trying to start putting those things into action. To think that is also essential, right? It's not just the thinking. The thinking is the first part, the reflecting, but just by thinking, we won't necessarily have change in behavior and change in action. So then how do we also change behavior and actions?
And I know along my career, you have been pivotal in reinforcing the importance of of taking time for yourself, and it has been so valuable. And I realize now I'm so happy to have the opportunity to have you share that message wider, I hope. Why is it important for us to look after ourselves? Why is self-care and this time to reflect and be with ourselves so important?
I think it's absolutely essential. I think especially for caring professionals, but not only. I also do some teaching with healthcare professionals, so they're mostly nurses, physiotherapists, nursing aides, this sort of people. And again, I think they have such a hard job, and their whole job is about taking care of other people, right? That's all they do. They wash people, they feed them, they change dressings, they give medication. People are crying and people are in pain and they want something all the time. That these people really, really need to take care of themselves, and I think that can look really different. So again, I don't like telling clients taking care of yourself means going to get a facial, or it means having a hobby, because I think it looks so different, right, for everybody. And some people like to bake, and some people like to run, and some people go to the gym, and some people pour themselves a glass of wine and they watch crappy television, whatever it is. But something, I think for me, the definition is it nourishes me, right? It gives me something. It helps me refill my tank, whatever that thing is. And some other people might think, oh my God, that thing is exhausting. I don't know, baking is like, oh my God, how can that nourish you? It's just so much work. It's really tiring. You make a huge mess. You have to clean up this huge mess. That is really not nourishing. But if it feels like that to you, and if you sort of come out the other end of it going like, whew, I feel so much better now. I feel maybe physically tired, but mentally I'm rested and I feel happier and my mood is better, then that is the thing that you need to do. And maybe you like to do lots of different things. And today it's a facial, and next week it's a drink with the girls, and the week after that it's sleeping in for an extra hour in the morning, or it's going for a jog. But kind of just really, I kind of like think about it like checking in with yourself and seeing, either if you want to call it the fuel tank or your inner temperature, how are things going? Are things kind of in balance? If they're not in balance, how far off balance are they? Because I think there's kind of that sweet spot, right, where it's a little bit beneath, and that can be sorted really quickly, right? That 1 hour of something will just take me right back over into kind of having enough petrol to last me for the day, for the week, whatever it is, versus, oh my God, now it's so empty. I'm not even going to get to the petrol station to fill up because there isn't enough to get me to that space, and never letting it get to that place, right? So kind of keeping it in, kind of sufficiently full that I'm never going to fall really, really empty. And again, different people need different things. If one person, it might be, I need 15 minutes a day where literally all I do is I make a cup of tea and I get a cigarette and I stand on the balcony and I watch life go by from the balcony, drinking my tea and smoking my cigarette. And that kind of gives me my sanity and prepares me for the rest of the day, or kind of lets me close off the day. And for someone else, it looks completely different and they need 1 hour or 2 hours, so each of us has to find what works for us.
Mm-hmm. I really think that's such a helpful metaphor, using this kind of idea of nourishment, or of or of like a fuel tank you were saying there. And I'm wondering, do you notice a difference between cultures about how people experience and value, I suppose it comes into values again, how people from different cultures experience and value self-care and that self-time? Because I'm finding that being based in cities that, and being based in the cultures that I've sometimes come across or found myself in, it's almost competitive to see who is most worn out, who is overriding themselves and completely ignoring their needs, and they're not replenishing themselves.
Yeah, and I think that may be kind of the culture of busy, right? Like who's the busiest, who has the most things to do, who can fit in a full-time job, taking care of the kids in the house, studying on the side, keep their hobbies going. I think that's kind of one element. And I think that I can also see that here. And I think another element maybe that I see a lot here, maybe in certain cultures, kind of where families are really important, maybe like Asian cultures, is that it's selfish to take time off, right? Because I don't know, especially if I already work, already at work from this time to this time, and then I only have whatever 3-4 hours with the kids once I get back home, and it's selfish to take out of those 3 hours to go, to a class for an hour or to meet up with friends, because then I should be with my kids, or I should be cooking, or I should be cleaning, and maybe really feeling guilty because this is just me time, but I have a family, and if it's not work time, it should be family time. I think a lot of people really struggle with that, and maybe particularly women in Malta really struggle with that, who might have, again, particularly if they work, so they work, and then when they come home, they still feel the need to kind of be, in a sense, super mom, right? So mom who has time to play with the kids and do the homework with the kids and cook a fresh meal and have the house absolutely spotless and wash the floor and do this and do that. And then where am I going to fit in this time for myself? And so with these kind of clients, I try to explore, well, okay, maybe you can't fit in the 1 hour, the 2 hours, or whatever much it is, but could you fit in the 15 minutes, the 20 minutes? Is there a space at all, which might be, instead of like driving home straight after work, sitting down somewhere, right, buying yourself a coffee, or literally sitting in the car, closing your eyes and giving yourself 10 minutes before you pick up the kids, or waking up a little bit earlier, or going to bed a little bit later, having a really long hot shower instead of just rushing through it because it's just another thing. I just need to shower. Come on, let's get this out of the way. But the shower is my sacred space, and I buy this really nice, expensive soap for myself, and I don't give it to anybody else. The kids don't get to use it. This is my soap, and I really like the smell of it, and I really enjoy my 20 minutes in the shower, and that's kind of my time for me. Of how can they fit it in a way that kind of lives up to, I need to give time to my family, to my kids, to my husband, to my parents who are elderly, to this person, to that person. But within that, I still manage to find a little bit of time for myself.
I really like that phrase. If we don't look after our wellness, we're going to be forced to look after our illness.
Yeah.
So I know that you've kind of given some suggestions. I love how you've, also made that point about not giving advice, but you've offered many brilliant suggestions already. But so some suggestions specifically around kind of getting into the world of existential thinking. Do you have any recommendations for someone who might be just starting off?
Okay. I think there are lots of really great books. And I think if you're thinking about like really, really, in a sense, layperson, there's a book called The Existentialist Cafe, which I think is really, really good. And it's really light. I've recommended to lots of people who are not into philosophy, I think you'd like this. And I think it's quite funny. It has some really basic philosophy. It's all completely correct and accurate, but it's described in a really simple way. You get a little bit of gossip about all different existential philosophers in it. So I think it's a really quick and easy read. I think it's quite a good way into it. I think Yalom is always very popular, right? Irvin Yalom, because he's written so much, so it's kind of impossible to mention all his books, but maybe the main text is Existential Philosophy, right, which he wrote like 1980-ish. Which again, I think Yalom is really nice because he brings in kind of maybe a little bit of philosophy light, but then he has all these clinical vignettes, so you kind of see what does it really look like, right? Or how do you really apply it? And maybe that's kind of a more American version of existentialism, right? If you want to be kind of really specific, I guess that European kind of continental philosophy is maybe a little bit heavier on the dark side of the philosophy and a little bit lower on the kind of the human potential movement that maybe Yalom brings a lot in. But I think it's a really good introduction, right? Because again, it's really simply written, very quick and easy to read. I think if you kind of look more at the hardcore people, I think Kierkegaard / Nietzsche are quite, maybe fun. I think a lot of people might not agree with the word fun to read, but I think if you compare someone like Kierkegaard with someone like Heidegger, Kierkegaard is quite a walk in the park to read. So he has kind of these much smaller books, and some of them can be quite entertaining as well. And he kind of highlights like little poems as well in them. So I think, you can kind of get a taste of kind of real philosophers, slightly easier and like Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra, I think, as well, is, kind of quite an interesting kind of parable, fable, whatever you want to call it, right? Of kind of man going up into the mountains, gaining knowledge and information, coming down, trying to kind of pass on his message like a prophet. This is what I saw on the mountain. This is the realizations that I've come to, and how the people accept or not accept this message. So I think they're quite nice introductory texts to kind of start getting into that. And maybe like Sartre, you can see some of his plays. So YouTube has quite a lot of Sartre's plays, and maybe one of the good ones is No Exit, which is the play where he kind of famously says that hell is other people. And you can kind of see that as a play, and kind of how we imprison each other and how society limits us and so on. So I think there's maybe lots of different stuff that you can look up online, also lots of lectures on existentialism or existential ideas as well. And Open Culture, I think, has a whole course. If you follow Open Culture, they have lots of courses available. They're proper university courses, so they're not quick and easy, but they're free, and you can sort of watch whichever bits you want. So you can have like a free hour, and they'll have like they have a whole course on existentialism, which is really, really very good, actually.
Oh wow, I've never heard of Open Culture before.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a really good website. They have some books for free, and it's all legit. They have some films as well on it. And then they have like recorded lectures. So they're actually university lectures at Yale and Stanford and so on. And they're kind of grouped into different, so they have like mathematics and physics and sciences, and then they have philosophy. And one of the courses that they have there is existentialism, or they did last time I checked. So I don't know if it's still there, but they have quite a good course on there about existentialism. It's quite long because it's like a whole university module on it, but you can drop in and kind of watch an hour here and there.
Amazing. And you've already touched on it already, but of course we have the book journey into it, we have the course journey into these ideas, but what about maybe like suggestions of films, or is there other ways, music, literature, that people can?
Yeah, I think there are lots of other ways. So there is like some literature, I think, kind of about making choices. I'm trying to think kind of good titles, kind of existential choices and limitations. And I think maybe like kind of a semi-philosophy book, Sophie's World. I don't know if you've kind of read Sophie's World. It's Jostein Gaarder. He's Danish, I think. And it is a bit of philosophy. So it's a young, like 12-year-old girl, and she's kind of going through making these choices, and there's this person telling her about kind of philosophical ideas. And I think sometimes Paulo Coelho has some of these books. I think he's a little bit formulaic. I think if you've kind of read one of his books, you've kind of read them all. He kind of changes the story, but he kind of always has the same message. But he does kind of have this idea, right, of making choices and going out and exploring and kind of going in and getting to know the self. So I think there's maybe some of those literature stuff and plays kind of by Sartre. I think all of his stuff is pretty existential. Feminism, I think you can like sort of look at Simone de Beauvoir, and she also has some novels. I think the kind of philosophical novels are not quite a novel, but they are supposedly sort of semi-fiction, her life story, that also kind of gets you into that. And I think kind of we've also mentioned people like Camus and stuff like this, who again, some of his works maybe aren't quite what we might really call a novel, but that is kind of how they are advertised, right? They are supposedly novels with lots of philosophical thinking, that hopefully the idea is to sort of turn it on to ourselves and think of what would we do in this situation, and what would we be left feeling in this situation.
Well, I really hope that this interview will encourage people to make the choice to engage with existential philosophies. And so I suppose, as a closing note, do you have not any advice, but any suggestions about for people who might be experiencing struggles within their own relational world, whatever that relationship might be, that that you wanted to share?
Well, I would say that in relationship, whether they're friendships or, with family members, with intimate partners, I think it kind of goes back to the cliche, right, of communication. So if you are unhappy in the relationship, does the other person know? And what are the two of you doing about it, right? So part is, what is, if I've told you specifically, it really hurts me when you do this, or it really annoys me when this happens. Is the other person taking that on board? Are they trying to make a change? Have they explained why they behave in this way, what it means to them? Where is this coming from? But I think, it keeps kind of coming back to communication. I think maybe the key part is, what are each of you ready to do for the relationship, right? So it's not what is one person ready to do, that I'll sacrifice everything to be with you and I really want to make you happy, so I'll give up everything to be with you. But what is the other person also, maybe not giving up, but changing and adapting and kind of accommodating to the other person? And if it's only happening in one direction, or kind of 80% of it is one person doing something and 20% is the other person, how do we feel about this in the long term? Because that might work for whatever, right? 6 months, you're going through a really hard time, so I'm really going to give you the space and I'm really going to accommodate. But if this is the way it's always going to be, am I always happy to give 80% of the relationship while you're only giving 20%? I think it really comes down to kind of communicating what is important. And maybe also, kind of back to what we were talking about, do I know what is important to me? What makes me happy? What matters in a relationship? What are the things that I can live without and what aren't? So it would be really nice if my partner were romantic and wrote me love poetry, but I can live without it. But I am not willing to live without, I don't know, someone who is honest with me and doesn't lie to me, so both of them might be really nice in a relationship, but some things I can feel like, yeah, nice to have them, can do without, versus this is really, really important. And these are the things, the 3 things, the 5 things, the 10 things that I absolutely cannot compromise on. And if the person isn't ready to give them to me, is this the right relationship for me? Because different people might have different ideas, right, of what is really important in a relationship, whether it's we both have to have a sense of humor, or whether it's, I know we both really want kids and we can't compromise on not having kids. If we can't have them naturally, we'll try IVF, we'll adopt kids, versus someone else who says, actually, kids really don't feature for me in a relationship, or I don't know, honesty really isn't a big deal. What we do together, we do together. What happens when we're not together is really no one's business. For some people that might really work because that's their definition of a relationship. That's maybe more casual, we get together to do this, we do this together well, whatever that is, whether it's we travel well, we have great sex, and the rest of it is really none of my business. So it's really what matters to you and how much can that other person really give you that. And if they can, if you've communicated that, if you try to find ways of working around that, but you're still really left with, this is not what I want, this isn't gonna give me what I need in a relationship, should you really be in that relationship?
It's absolute words of wisdom as always with you, Patricia. It's really been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Before we close the interview, was there anything that you wanted to add or say?
No, it was really nice meeting you, and I look forward, to sort of seeing the others, because I'm quite curious to see what everybody else had to say, and kind of, I think that's really how we learn a lot about, I think therapy is such kind of a mysterious business, right? What do people do in the closed room with their clients? And we can go to supervision and get a little hint of what other people are doing, but it would be really interesting to see what other people kind of answer to your questions and how they understand existentialism and kind of what they do with their clients and how they, kind of live an existential life, so to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. The pressure is definitely on for me to get these videos edited and up and ready to share. And I really look forward to it. But of course, I will keep you posted with that. And once again, thank you so, so much for taking the time to be here and share your words today.
You're welcome, Natalie, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you.